why do advisors leave the Wirehouse model for the RIA model? That is today's question on the Transition to RIA question and answer series. It is episode number 137. Hi, I'm Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, where we help you understand everything there is to know about why and how to transition your practice to the RIA model. If you're not already there, if you start out by heading on over to transitiontoria.com, you can find all the resources we make available from this entire series in video format, podcast format. There's articles, there's white papers, all kinds of resources to help you better understand the model. Again, transitiontoria.com. Okay, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about essentially what is prompting, what is motivating advisors to leave the Wirehouse model and transition their practice to the RIA model. Now, there was a time this was not the trend. Now, this just spoiler, that is the trend. That has been the trend. That is the trend currently. That has been the trend for several years now. If you look at the industry stats of when advisors change affiliation options, that river only runs in one direction. It leads to more and more independence. There are not advisors at RIAs that are going to the Wirehouse world. It only goes in one direction, and you have to ask yourself why that is. We're going to be talking about some of those motivations on this episode. But there was a time that wasn't the case, that advisors were not leaving the Wirehouse world to go to the RIA world. And some of the reasons at the time, or some of at least how it was positioned as an example, is there was a time that there was a lot of faith in that, the proverbial name on the side of the building, that the belief was that clients only wanted to work with a financial advisor that was at this big name Wirehouse firm. And that has shifted tremendously, in large part because of the damage that was done during the 07, 08, 09 crash, where the reputation of some of these firms was heavily damaged, essentially collateral damage across the board. And no longer was there that ironclad reverence that went to these named firms, and clients, that was no longer essentially a must-have kind of thing. And it's taken a while for advisors of all stripes to accept that fact, particularly some that have been around a very long time, that lived in the time where it did have much more credence to it. But those times have changed. So that is one of the reasons it's no longer the opposite. Another example is there was a time the wirehouses did have better technology. That is now, than the RIA model, that is now entirely opposite. So just a quick primer on why that is the case is it costs money to create and maintain and update in technology solutions. And there was a time that the wirehouses had a bit of a monopoly, if you will, on a larger user base. So a particular wirehouse firm had 10,000 plus advisors to spread the cost of that technology across that would utilize that technology. Whereas at the time in the RIA space, any of the then tech providers supporting the RIA space had nowhere near that many users, hence couldn't as easily reinvest back into their offer and build it and be competitive. And so that was an advantage. The reality is that's now 100% flipped. There are now tech tools supporting the RIA model that have way more advisor customers than any one wirehouse has advisors as customers. And so if anything, it's 180 degrees different. There's more reinvestment, there's more resources, there's more options. The technology is now superior in the RIA space over the wirehouse space, although that was the opposite again at one point. Another just backstory here on the opposite approach here. There was a time also when the investment solutions available to advisors was superior to what could be utilized in the RIA space, with the idea being that only these large wirehouse firms had access to potentially certain alternatives or certain managers because they had this big scale to be able to track those solutions. Similar to technology, that also has entirely flipped. You'd be hard pressed to find any sort of investment solution, whether it's alternatives, money managers, those sorts of things, that is available in the wirehouse world that's not available in the RIA space. That's provided, of course, you're not using proprietary products of your firm, which arguably you shouldn't be using anyways. But of the solutions that your firm has access to, you almost find all of them available in the RIA space. And if anything, the selection available to choose from is far superior in the RIA space now, because your firm, even though they perhaps has at a wirehouse, has the scale to access all the solutions perhaps, they don't choose to provide all of those solutions available to you. They have a much narrower subset of investment solutions available to you. So that's an example where that used to be the case, where advisors, a reason advisors might stay at the wirehouse model is because better investment solutions. Again, 100% no longer the case. And then the final just point on the backstory items here is there was a time, and the saying would go, and there's still some people belaboring on with this tired, worn out talking point that, oh, the RIA model was only for advisors that couldn't cut it at the wirehouse model, the big behemoth firms. They couldn't take the pressure, they couldn't attract clients, they couldn't grow their practice. And perhaps there was a time, there was a shred of truth to that, but that is absolutely no longer the case. That's not a reason. I mean, there might be some advisors that don't work out a particular firm and they just they choose a new path and happens to be RIA. But to suggest that, oh, people only go RIA because they can't cut it at the wirehouse firms, that's a tired old excuse that has no validity any longer. But there was a time it for surely was at least said, whether how much weight it had. Either way, there's no credence to it now. So that was a little backstory of why this conversation didn't happen 20 years ago. It was kind of a bit of a no-brainer 20 years ago that you would perhaps stay in the wirehouse world because of some of these advantages I just talked about. So the question is, well, okay, well, the trend is now different. The trend is advisors going more and more independent. So what is driving that? So there's a couple big buckets, big items on this, and it typically falls into one of two buckets, either the flexibility bucket or the economics bucket. So I'm just going to give you some of the items that fall within each one of those. And typically when I'm having conversations with wirehouse advisors, they lead with items that fall into the flexibility bucket. So that at least seems to be the most pressing issue for them. Whether it's most pressing and they just, or they just don't want to bring up the fact that, oh, I'd like to make more higher income as the first thing they mention. Perhaps there's something along there too. Generally, the motivations are in both buckets, the flexibility and the economics, but the conversations usually start on the flexibility front. So some examples of that flexibility. One, again, I mentioned it, technology now is superior in the RIA model. Not just the degree of technology, the selection available to you. There are literally hundreds of fintech providers in the marketplace now. If you are in the RIA model, particularly if you have your own RIA, you can go out into that marketplace and choose whichever solutions you want to work with. There is no gatekeeper. Now, you want to make sure logistically it makes sense. You want to make sure from an economic perspective it makes sense that it's going to add value to your team or your clients. So it's not that there's no decision points there, but you can go out into that landscape, and if there's something you think will improve your practice, improve your ability to compete in the marketplace, you can just start using it. You don't have to ask someone's permission. And by the way, in the wirehouse world, typically not only will you be told no, there won't even be a roadmap added. It won't be added to any roadmap to get you there at some point. All the while, your competition in the independent RIA space are using all of those tools. So you're at a disadvantage. So oftentimes advisors are seeking out the flexibility of just better and more technology options. Another item in the flexibility bucket is the ability to better market and brand your practice. If you're at that wirehouse firm, your brand and ability is typically at best a byline of the parent company. You might be the Wales group of Wirehouse X, and your website is wirehousex.com / whatever region you're in / maybe this quasi-branded group name you have. Whereas your competition in the RIA space has a full-on brand, has a full-on website that reflects only their brand. They are out there marketing in all kinds of ways that wirehouse advisors typically cannot do or cannot do easily. Whether you want to have a podcast, you want to make videos, you want to have a blog, you want to be quoted in the media. There's all kinds of additional flexibility from that marketing and branding perspective that is a big driver of advisors from that wirehouse, which is much more restrictive in that regard, much more captive into the RIA space. The next item, I already kind of touched on it, but from a flexibility standpoint, is just the investment solutions you have available to you. So at your current firm, if you're at a captive W-2 wirehouse type firm, you only can play in the sandbox of investment solutions that your firm allows you to play in, whether that is managers, alternatives. There can even be guardrails on certain mutual funds or ETF products. So you only can play in not the universe of options, the sandbox, the narrower sandbox that your firm is allowing you to use in that regard. In the RIA space, you have those options available to you. Now, you still need to do work and due diligence and decide if these are good solutions you want to use with your clients. But there is no gatekeeper there. When you have your own RIA, you can decide whether you want to use additional investment solutions, and there's not some subset that you only can choose from. So again, that's another big flexibility item. Another driver on the flexibility front is wirehouse advisors typically want to be able to expand their service offering to clients. And this is particularly constructive in the world that we're leading in, where while we haven't seen fee compression, which was predicted for a long time, that proverbial 1% fee compression or fee has stayed relatively stable, even with the advent of robo-advisors and stuff. That fee has stayed relatively stable, but the value provided for the fee has trended upward, that you need to provide more and more value to still justify that fee. And so in the RIA space, you have a much more flexibility with what that service offering is. Now, some of you might not desire to do some of these things, but for those that do, you want that flexibility of, are you going to offer more specific tax plan and expertise in-house, or estate plan and expertise in-house, or help with other facets of your client's world that you're not able to currently, and present that more ensemble practice, as often referred to, that there's a suite of services that you can provide all under one roof. Whereas typically when you're at the wirehouse model, most of those auxiliary services you are not allowed to offer. But again, your competition in the independent RIA space has that flexibility if they choose to. Not all do. That's not part of their desired service offering. But to the degree you want to add those things, and to the degree the market eventually demands that perhaps certain additional services be offered, you want the flexibility to be able to do that. And then the final item just on flexibility is there are wirehouse advisors that just want to be true business owners. Now, I know at some W-2 platforms, they present it and talk about it as, oh, you are a business owner with your practice, and they kind of speak in those terms. It's not at all the case, right? You are a practitioner, you're a financial advisor. That's very honorable. That's something you should be very proud of. That can provide a very nice, comfortable, generous lifestyle and income, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you're not a business owner in that capacity. If you truly want to own a business, and we'll get into the economics and the benefits of truly owning your business, but it's not just economics, it's being the boss, it's calling the shots, it's not having to ask someone else's permission if you can do something, whether it's ad technology, how you want to market your services, brand your services. The local media wants to quote you. You can just talk to them. You don't have to ask permission or see if that's okay for you to do, or run it by compliance first. There are folks that just want to be truly business owners, and that's not for everyone. Again, some folks are very content and happy just being that practitioner, and that's something to be very proud of. But to the degree you aspire to truly be a business owner, it is not possible in that wirehouse space, no matter how it's presented or wordsmithed. You need to be independent to actually get the benefits of being a business owner. So that brings us on to economics, which is a lot of the economic upsides associated with being a business owner. So the first one is, generally speaking, there's higher income to be earned in that independent RIA space. Now, because you have all the flexibility we've talked about, and there's all kinds of other flexibility items I didn't even get into about the ability to build out your team and manage your team how you want. But because you have all those choices, you will be a big driver of your economics. So if you want a very extravagant office and a very large team, well, that's going to lower your economics. If you think you can be more lean or more efficient with technology, that will drive your economics higher. But typically, a well-run, reasonably sized RIA would typically always net you, as the advisor, as the owner, as the team, higher than you can earn in the wirehouse space, sometimes meaningfully higher. Now, that typically comes with more responsibilities. You are a business owner. You are responsible for all these things. You do have more to do than just being that practitioner. So it's not for everyone. No matter that higher economic upside, the higher income, you have to weigh what those additional responsibilities are and say, okay, is that worth it to me for the trade-offs of that? And there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't want to do any of that. I accept I'm going to have less flexibility. I'm going to accept I'm going to make less income, but maybe I just want to be a practitioner. Maybe I just want to be an advisor, and I'll put up with the guardrails, and that's fine. And there are a lot of advisors that will never make that move. I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging that, but to the degree you aspire to do these things over here, just know that's available to you. So higher income is one of them. There's also a desire to have better enterprise value from your practice. So yes, you can quote unquote retire in the wirehouse world, and there's the often referred to as sunset programs or retirement programs, and you're kind of step away over a series of years and someone takes over your practice. It is what it is. When you look at the economics of exiting under that pathway in the wirehouse world and what the economics and opportunities are to exit in the RIA space, it is generally significantly more valuable from an enterprise value standpoint to do it in the RIA space. Just a couple reasons. It's beyond the scope of this episode, but you have more buyers out there looking to buy practices. The taxation on your income that you receive from selling your practice is more advantageous in the RIA space. You have more flexibility in how to structure your eventual exit and how you hand it off and over what time period. So the ability to get the higher enterprise value and exit more on your terms, it is what it is. There's no debate in it. It can be generous in the wirehouse space, but there's more flexibility and almost always better economics for it in the RIA space. The next economic item I just mentioned, taxation. That's both with the eventual exit from the industry with your enterprise value, also just tax advantages of running your business on a day-to-day basis and the ability to expense things you likely cannot expense currently in a W-2 wirehouse type world. And then related to that, and I've done episodes on this, is the ability and the advantages from an economic standpoint to control your local real estate footprint. So for some of you, that's the ability, depends on your geography, to potentially, as the just a very extreme example, own the office building that you use for your practice, and that over time, if you have 5, 10, 15, 20 years left in your career, that not only are you building the enterprise value in your practice, you are building equity value in an asset that when you go to retire, you can sell that property alongside it. I've seen advisors where they've done this over a long period of time, and at the end of the day, when they went to sell their practice, the value of the property is worth essentially just as much as the practice itself. So they've essentially doubled the value of what their life's work is. They're exited on the way out. And that's not to mention all the tax benefits associated with having that real estate along the way as well. So a lot of economic advantages that the RIA model has over the wirehouse model. Again, that's another big driver of why advisors leave the wirehouse world to that independent RIA world. So to wrap up, just a few things of kind of what caused all this change. I started this by talking about there was once upon a time where the pendulum was on the wirehouse side, and that pendulum has moved entirely in the other direction now on many fronts. So a couple of drivers that created that situation. One, the ecosystem supporting the RIA model has evolved tremendously over the last 5, 10, 15 years. When I talk about hundreds of fintech hundreds of fintech providers, when I talk about your ability to access just as much, if not typically significantly more alternative investments out there, that's all because there have been solution providers built up in that ecosystem supporting the RA model to make all that happen. And that arguably, or not arguably, that simply wasn't there 20 years ago. Now it is there. So these very large wirehouse teams that have ultra high net worth clients or high net worth clients or have significant needs that they need to be able to provide for their clients, it was true. There was a time that was either not easily accessible in the RA model or not available at all. But again, that has fundamentally changed because of how much that ecosystem has been built up over the last 5, 10, 15 years. So if you're not familiar with that, if you've been in the industry for a very long time and you haven't taken the time to learn all that, you owe it to yourself to figure out how all that works, and don't assume anything that what you have available to you now is somehow not going to be available to you in the RA space. Like I said, if anything, it's not only available, it's even better in that capacity. So one, the buildup of the ecosystem. The next one is there's been great evolution of what's often referred to as supported independence offerings or platforms. So there are many advisors that say, hey, I do tend to be more heavily weighted towards just wanting to be a practitioner, and more so wear that hat than the business owner hat. So the idea of having to manage technology and client fee bill and all these other variables that go into having your own RA, there's a lot of advisors that say, hey, I get all the upsides, I get the better flexibility, I get the better economics, but either just don't want to deal with that or it's just not worth it to me. Well, guess what? There have been some wonderful, again, often referred to as supported independence platforms that have come along that say, hey, if you want most of these benefits, the economics, flexibility, but hey, you'd rather not handle all of those individual pieces yourself, we will bundle a lot of that up, not necessarily all of it. There'll still be, there's generally always at least some additional responsibilities in that independent RA space than you have now in the W-2 model, so to be fair, but they bundle a lot of that up and say, hey, we will be a single provider for say 80% of everything you need, and we will take off a lot of that blocking and tackling, the behind the scenes stuff, the stuff that you're not passionate about, the stuff that's not client facing. We will take that off your plate. We will provide that for you in that supported independence route, and that has evolved tremendously, and there's several different flavors of that out there. So if you're not familiar with those, I'm happy to go over that with you and what those look like. But without that, there's no doubt there'd be many teams and advisors that would not have made the move because they are utilizing those pathways, and that is something that appeals to them or makes it possible for them to make that move. And then I think the final item I have, and I think this one's meaningful. Sometimes in life, we just need to see that something's possible. And there's the story of the guy that first broke the 4-minute mile. That it had never been done before. For those that don't know the tale, it had never been done before. It was thought to be impossible, and finally a guy did it. And then within a relatively short period of time after that, multiple other people broke the 4-minute mile. So this thing that was thought to be impossible or just not even worth trying, one person showed it was possible, and then countless people do it. And now I think I saw the other day, high schoolers are even capable of doing it now. You see that in the RA space as well. There's not just one firm we could point back to or one team, but there are now, fast forward, routinely billion-dollar teams, billion-dollar advisors at wirehouses that leave the wirehouse for the RIA model. And I think in part of that was built up with just the confidence of seeing others having done it. So I can't point back to one specific team that everyone would say, broke the dam and was the first $2 billion team to leave a wirehouse and start their own RIA. But that process did start. It arguably took a little time to build up, but now that is routine to see. So I think part of this trend is not just all these benefits, because that's all great, but you still need the confidence that, okay, that's great, but that's not only doable, you're seeing successful advisors and teams do it, Okay, it's not that old tired talking point about, well, this is for just for people that can't cut it. These are very large corner office, successful teams that are doing this research and are choosing to go in that direction. So keep that in mind. To the degree you think, I don't know if that's for me, I would just challenge you to say, well, it might not be for you. So number one, I can help you. Let's figure it out. Let's figure out if it is for you. But if you think your practice is too big or too sophisticated, or you have clients with too much high net worth needs that somehow that cannot be supported in the RIA model, rest assured you are not breaking new ground here. There are plenty of teams of your size or larger that have already made that move, and you can look out in the marketplace and see them quite satisfied. And likewise, I would challenge you to find any of those people, and I don't know of any, I've never heard of any, that made that move and then subsequently down the line decided, oh, that Wirehouse world is actually better for us. Let us go back to the Wirehouse world. As I said at the top, that trend is telling. You need to take that to heart of why does the river only run in one direction? So with that, like I said at the top, my name is Brad Wales with Transition to RIA, helping you understand how the RIA model works, how it would look for your practice, what all those advantages are, but just as important, I always do a fair shake, what those additional responsibilities are as well. And in addition, how you can manage those responsibilities. There's several different ways to do that. For example, maybe with a supported independence platform. So that is certainly something I talk to advisors all day long about. Happy to have that conversation with you as well. First things first, though, head on over to transitiontoria.com. And as I noted, you can find this entire series in video format, podcast format. There's articles, there's white papers. I even have a new vendor profile series. Check out if you haven't checked that out. But at the top of every page is a contact link. If you click on that, you can instantly and easily schedule time to have a one-on-one conversation with me, whether you're a Wirehouse advisor and you want to talk about today's topic or anything else RIA related. I'm happy to have that conversation with you. Again, head on over to transitiontoria.com. And with that, I hope you found value in today's episode, and I'll see you on the next one.